Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. So a question that comes up sometimes when we talk about managing students and their behavior is, why is this a challenge or why is this so difficult? So I'm going to give you 4 reasons today. I'm thinking this is a video that there'll likely be a part two to, but today we're going to talk about 4 reasons for why managing student behavior is a challenge. So the first is this idea of mirror neurons. The way I like to explain this is basically that strong emotions are contagious. And so if our students are in a heightened emotional place where they are angry, upset, frustrated, and they are showing that to us very clearly and obviously, us as adults can often catch some of those strong emotions. And so that makes it harder for us to respond in a calm, logical, rational way because we have caught into the frustration and anger of the students. And so one of the strategies is when we see that a student is in that really heightened emotional state, us as the adults in the situation trying to kind of lower the volume of our voice, trying to make sure that we are presenting as calm, with the hope being that the student might catch our calmness and not that we're going to catch their anger or frustration. Another reason for why managing student behavior can be a challenge. So the front part of our brain here, the logic and impulse control parts, when we are stressed as humans, when students get stressed out, this part of the brain gets impacted by a chemical known as cortisol, which makes it difficult for that student to think in a logical and reasonable way. And students who are impacted by this, you'll often see, are in fight, flight, or freeze. They're fighting somebody or something. It could be a desk, a bulletin board, something. They're running away, or they're, hands clenched, eyes closed. They're not talking to anybody, and they're just kind of. So when a student's in that situation, it can be hard to rationalize with them, or just about impossible. And so, there's calming methods and strategies that we want to implement at this time. We don't want to talk to the kids about consequences or punishment at this time because they're not going to process that in a really logical, rational way. This is where a high school senior might say something like, I don't care about prom. I don't care about graduation. If the kid was to stop and really think about it, he does care. She does care about those things. But right now they're not thinking clearly because their brain has been impacted by this cortisol, this stress hormone. The other part of this is adults are not immune to this stress hormone. And so when a kid does something that can be stressful for a teacher, their brain also gets impacted by cortisol, which is why, sometimes teachers will engage in conversations with students that go something like, no, I didn't. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. Or any other kind of really conversation that if the teacher was to stop and think logically and rationally, they probably wouldn't engage with the student. That to me is a teacher who has been impacted by cortisol. And so again, an awareness of mirror neurons and an awareness of cortisol and its impact is step one. Step two that I usually suggest to teachers is we're good about putting up visual reminders for students. If I taught my students how to add fractions, I'm going to put up a chart that reminds them to that, or have a bulletin board. Us as adults, we benefit from visual reminders as well. So maybe you put up a chart in your room that tells you what's your process for responding to unwanted behavior. We're going to have another video where we talk about a continuum of responses. That might be a good place to go next. Okay. Another issue that makes managing behavior a challenge is something called the fundamental attribution error. And it's this incorrect belief in our brain that when we see a child do something that we don't like, that's evidence that they're a bad person, that there's intention behind it. They want to get us upset. They want to frustrate us. They want their classmates to not learn. The reality of the situation is kids do well when they can, most often. The same is true for adults. When adults know what to do, they will most often do well. But behavior is surrounded by the environment that the student's in. It's like, what are the other classmates doing? What's the expectations? How clearly have those things been communicated? It can also be impacted by a student's access to resources. It requires glucose in the blood and brain, that energy to think, to problem solve, to use patience. And if students don't have sleep, if they don't have food, that's going to impact behavior. Models are important. What are they seeing from their teachers? What are they seeing from their classmates? What are they seeing from their parents? But that can really impact their behavior as well, models. And then finally, culture, and it's not just, we wouldn't want to say that we don't want to see certain behaviors. I think the better way to present it to students sometimes is about code switching, and what's appropriate at home might not be appropriate at school. Just like what's appropriate on the playground is not appropriate in the library, and kind of just talking to kids about that need to be able to change behavior based on settings. And then finally, the last one for this first round of what makes managing behavior challenging, is this idea that managing student behavior requires problem solving. What works for one will not work for all. What worked 5 years ago may not work any longer. And so really thinking about, what's my plan to address this behavior, putting that plan in place, and then stepping back and watching the outcomes. How did the students respond to this? Based on that, we make decisions. Do I continue with this intervention, or should I move in a different direction and try something else? I think worst case scenario is we are doing something and we are aware that it is not effective, but our actions are to continue doing that thing for a long period of time. So, just continuously remembering, let me plan an intervention, let me do it, let me step back and study the outcome, how do the students respond to that, and then making database decisions about moving forward. Thanks for watching, and keep an eye out for more videos.